Major shakeup tonight in the efforts to replace the Cape Fear Memorial Bridge. We know the bridge is nearing the end of its lifespan, but replacing it could be much tougher than originally thought.
With over $200 million in federal funding put on pause due to an executive order by the Trump administration, officials are now left wondering when that money can move forward. WECT's Ava Bringord has been in talks with the North Carolina Department of Transportation today. Ava, when was the department first notified about this?
Well, Fran, a spokesperson with NCDOT tells me an executive order from February 26th put the funding on pause. But city leaders tell us they weren't notified until yesterday, almost a week later. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. The application to secure the millions in grant funding listed a bridge design that is 135 feet tall. But WECT learned today that estimated cost has skyrocketed to over $1 billion, more than double the original cost. NCDOT says that cost comes down to inflation impacts on materials, but we're told engineers are continuing to work with local, state, and federal partners despite this funding pause. NCDOT Transportation Representative Landon Zimmer tells us today, quote, "It is not uncommon for new administrations to pause funding disbursements for review purposes. We have received no indication that this pause will be permanent." Now, we're also hearing from U.S. Senator Thom Tillis tonight. He played a big part in advocating and securing this grant funding. Tillis says the bridge is going through the review process and is not in danger of being removed. Fran?
So, Ava, the next step in this process is determining the bridge height, right?
Yeah, that's right. The height will be determined by the U.S. Coast Guard and Army Corps of Engineers, and that's set to be determined this month.
All right, Ava, thanks so much for that update.